Hello, folks, and thank you for joining in again. This is Meet Music Knoxville, and I am your host, Nick Horner, and I have the best job in the world because my job is to come woefully unprepared to meet with some of the greatest folks in this music scene here in Knoxville. And I'm really excited today. We're going to have Roger Hay speak with us, but first I just want to take a moment and say a very, very, very special thank you to Raven Records and Rarities and Hutch and Howard Realty of Keller Williams for supporting real Knoxville music. We could not do this without you folks. This station is all about community, and we can't do it without your support, so thank you so much. Let's get on to this interview. We are in lovely South Knoxville. This is the last of many interviews that have happened at this beautiful corner lot location. It's muggy. It is a hot one. I'm sure I'm going to be sweating by the end of this. But we're about to pass the time with some epic conversation. I know Roger Hay, thank you so much for being with us.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you for having me, Nick. Appreciate it, man. Very much.
Yeah. So I'll just get this kick started by saying I have your name. I've been here since 2020. Your name has been coming up so much. And I think the first one was John Puckett, who was suggesting to get you on this show.
Oh, Puckett's great, yes.
What a great dude. And then most recently, Neil Capps was saying, man, you gotta
fabulous.
Chat with Roger.
What a fabulous guy. Yeah, both those two are fabulous. You know, part of the circle of great players. I am still stunned at how many amazing musicians we have in this town that are, beyond capable. Neil and John are just part of the crew, and I get the very good fortune of being able to perform with them on occasion, along with the other projects I do, and they have that capability of spreading it to others too, because they are, I guess, what we call freelancers, right? Yeah. Both of them fit in, and like, hey, I can play guitar. Neil plays keys, right? And instead of doing his own thing, he kind of is that guy you call for, hey, let's do some keys. And then Puckett has become a tremendous instrumentalist on the guitar, even though he does great video stuff for UT. Yeah. But his guitar work, especially because in this area, he's become known as a really good slide player, which, works really well in these hills here. So, yeah.
So where are you from? Knoxville.
That's the toughest question in the world, okay? So my dad was in the Navy first, and then he was an evangelist, right? And I had a tent ministry. So I traveled a tremendous. I never was even in the same elementary school on any of my elementary school years. Now, once we got to the kids, we had three of us, where we got old enough to go into like the later part of middle school and high school, then he would left us at one location, and he traveled, but formerly he would take us with him. So I lived all over, mainly the South, but all over, everywhere, Georgia, Florida, Texas, Louisiana. We lived all kind of places. So I picked up all these great experiences, for that back then I thought were tough. But now I realize how great it was that I got to see that expanse that other people sometimes never got to see, right? Yeah. So we got to do all that. So I grew up in all those places. I consider myself from here because I've been here the longest. I graduated in West Tennessee at the big Chester County High School, same place as Eddie Arnold, right? So that was my 4 years of high school there, and that's where I kind of sprang forward. And I got a job with Charvel Jackson Guitars, and I was traveling for them, doing selling and et cetera for them. And I just got recently married at the time, and my wife said, hey, because I was living in Memphis, Tennessee at the time, and all my territory was east, because I went all the way to the East Coast, and nothing west of Memphis. Memphis is as far as I went west, and she said, we need to think about moving. And she said, find some place that you really like. And as I traveled cities, I would write down, things I liked, and Knoxville came up.
Wow.
The champ. Yeah. So I moved here on purpose a long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah. It's got that allure to it.
It does.
So, but before we move on too much from your childhood, was music a part of that ministry?
Or? Oh, very much. Yeah. My father, a guitar, can play about anything. But my father actually, when he was younger, played music and then got a job as a DJ. And actually played with like Willie Nelson in the 50s and Mel Tillis, right? He became the song leader for someone that we probably all know. He became the song leader when he became baptized in the ministry for Oral Roberts. So from 1966 through 1970, he was the music minister and the person who brought Oral Roberts onto the stage and built up the crowd, which is where I learned dynamics from, right? If you ever heard the keyboard player under a hot tent on a summer day, right, sawdust on the floor, right, and all these people in their white shirts and et cetera, because it'd be summer day, right, and fixing to bring out Brother Oral Roberts, who was back then. We had that big healing ministry with these massive canvas tents, so it's hot in there. But my dad would be up there singing, and the keyboard player got that organ, right, the two-tier organ. And had the two big Leslies, and they get that slow down and build up, and when they'd sing something quiet, it would go down, and that Leslie would be slow, right, and then all of a sudden they'd bring it up to get the crowd up and bring Brother Roberts on and this kind of stuff. So I got the feel for dynamics and the way it brought energy to the crowd, and that later became very useful in music for me.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah,
that's impactful. And so your dad was the singer, and he also played a bunch of other instruments.
He played a bunch of instruments, was the song leader is what they would call him in those days. And, of course, they'd play a lot of gospel music, but he also was the testimony leader to bring Oral Roberts on. So my father started his own ministry in 1970, and later in his life became fairly popular. His YouTube channel sometimes had 700,000 or 800,000, views. So, yeah, he became, pretty much a cavalier, a little bit of a rebel, right? But all about God, all 24/7.
Yeah, and are you also still connected with faith and stuff, or have you parted ways a little bit?
Doctrine wears me out, so I'm not a doctrine guy. My dad said something that I thought was really good one time, and he was talking about it in Memphis, I think, at the time. Maybe he said, Paul wrote a book, famous book, Corinthians, in the Bible, and it says to the church at Corinth, so they call it Corinthians, right? And you would think that he took this, whatever the letter was, have it delivered to the church at Corinth. He said, if I wrote a letter to the church of Memphis, where would it go? Does it go to the Baptist church? Does it go to the Methodist? Does it go to Catholic? He said, I think they missed the point of what God is. I don't know that he's some guy with a big gray beard or whatever, but the energy that connects us all is some kind of power. And so I see the good in that, and the good that was in the good parts of the Bible. Remember, the Bible was written by men who loved God, so none of us are perfect. So that I think that energy, I think that's what music is, right?
Yeah.
Is that energy that speaks to us on a level maybe that God speaks to us on.
Oh, absolutely.
Whatever
that binding power.
That's it.
Yeah.
Whatever God is in your interpretation, right?
Yeah.
I think that because you and I could sit down and pick music and play this, and all of a sudden have this language together, even though we didn't know each other, may not even know the tune.
Yeah.
Right. But this is something that I think that that's the reason I don't really think there's too many doctrines that take, hey, this thing means this, and they've got an interpretation of it, and that interpretation will make somebody else mad, and pretty soon they'll be in a war over it, right?
Yeah.
so I get that. I think that you have to, I believe in standing your ground on some things, but I don't believe in standing your ground in a way that is evil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for hopping off into that direction.
That's the philosophy. That's too heavy, Nick. We could go through. Do you go with Nick or Nicholas? Right? You could dig this ditch so deep.
I know.
And we could both soothe emotions and ruffle feathers beyond our wildest dreams. So let's not go into that too far.
That's fun. It is funny though. It's we needn't talk about it anymore. More than the fact that I think that as talking to musicians, it is really funny to know we have to deal with a lot of really deep stuff, whether it's lyrics or emotion. I mean, it's such an emotional process. A lot of times these folks do have really ensconced religious or spiritual belief systems, and it's amazing how those things tie in together.
I think it is part of being human. Mm-hmm. I think we can't live without serving a God, and I don't mean that we're like some a minister might get up there and preach that you're evil for not being a believer or whatever. I don't believe it. I believe we find something. And I wrote I have a book of poetry out actually, and I wrote a couple of poems, and one of them was about being, a God with no scars on, no calluses on his hands. What kind of God is that? Somebody that sits around and just watches something. So I don't believe in that. I believe that we have to have some reason to exist because we do have a finality. Mm-hmm. Even the greatest humans of all time, George Washington, Napoleon, Alexander the Great, his name was even great, right? Alexander the Great, right? But he's not around. He didn't make it.
Yeah.
They didn't survive. We don't get to survive. So the fact that, I think this is why perhaps the angels are jealous of us. Edgar Poe used to say that, right?
Yeah.
Even the seraphs in heaven are jealous, right? Are envious of me and my love. The fact that we have a end to this, whatever our life will be, means that we want to accomplish something while we're here. Yeah. Whether it is love, joy, happiness, a building, right? Andrew Lloyd Webber building a crazy building, right? Mm-hmm. Building whatever it is that you do, dog animals out of a balloon, right? Whatever you do,
yeah.
Why would
That's
you
the act
do
of
it?
Creation. It's about perpetuating.
That's it. I wrote one time because we're musicians, right? So we'll sit in a dark room over our instrument, studying it so we can go perform it because we're driven from the inside to do that. But if you were in heaven, right, and you had 400 more billion years of living, why would you study guitar that day? Tomorrow's just as good.
Oh, yeah.
Or the next day. I think the fact that we have a existence, and we know this existence is valuable, even though sometimes we waste it, right? Which is part of the fun of it, right? But that existence drives us to find why can I fiddle between the flat 3 and the regular 3 and play a 7th chord,
Yeah.
Why does that happen?
Yeah.
Right? Those things. Those things that drive us, may not think about it, but I think the thing that drives us is we have a finality.
Oh, yeah.
We hide it every day.
Well, talking about your creation,
right.
and your creative stuff, you mentioned that you wrote a book of poetry.
I do. Mm-hmm.
Tell me more about this. So clearly you're a writer.
Yes.
Music. Is there any other?
I chased the goal of being a successful musician from the time I left high school. Before high school, even, right? We were playing, but back then you have to understand this is the late 70s, early 80s, right? And the only thing that we seen as success was signing a recording contract, which I got close to a couple of times, right? Even had some offers and etc. But in this chase, then all of a sudden, I got really, really frustrated. And one time, I remember the whole thing. I put my hair in a ponytail and cut it, and I sold every piece of gear I had except for one guitar, right? Because I was frustrated with the music business. Still am to this day. Business is not music creation, so you really need somebody else for that part of it. But I got frustrated with it, but I had to have something creative, right? Because you just am that way. So for about 8 years, I didn't perform, even though I had my guitar in my office with me. But I wrote 4 novels, which, even though I tried, never got published. But I did have I had some of my short stories published, and I had some of my poems published. And after a while, I had a collection of my poems that I had published, all put together. So I did. It's just another way to
express.
Well, I love the creativity. Sometimes people want to say, I got something to say and I want somebody to hear it, which wasn't my point of poetry as much as it would have been for others. It wasn't that I had to yell at the world about, hey, listen to me. It was more, I guess, like we said with Andrew Lloyd Webber or any great builder, language has such structures.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And the delivery of it. I was telling this to one of my guitar students the other day because we was talking about how phrasing on guitar scales and movements must be sometimes. Is when I was learning language, the first thing I learned as far as a movement other than walking was jump, right? And you go, hey, jump. But then later on you learn the word leap. Mm-hmm. And there's a vast difference, even though they're the same, right? So the construction of language, if you tell us, there's no lover's jump. There's a lover's leap, right?
Right.
A leap of faith. There's not a jump of faith. There's a little bit difference, a little bit more joy and a little bit more interpretation, not knowing when you leap. So these kind of things put into words and the way you structure them, right? Going back to when I was young, my dad when he first got into ministry and this kind of stuff, then he went totally crazy to the crazy side, right? Where we were not allowed to have we had zero television or we had one radio in the house, and he listened to it from 6 to 6:30 to see if the 4 horses of apocalypse were running, right? This went on for 8 or 10 years but but he told me something very interesting one time, and he said, "This is my way that I want to serve God." And he said, "You know, you're my son, so you have to live at this house, but you don't necessarily have to." You know, so he gave me a library card, and he said, "You could check out any book, anything you want."
Wow.
And back then we had, instead of headsets, we had one little earpiece, right?
Yeah.
And he said, at night, if you want to listen to the radio and it's not going blasting through the house, you can listen to whatever you want.
Yeah.
He said, because that may not be your life, right? So I would go to the library, and I got Louis L'Amour, right, the Westerns, right, because I love this great escapism that I got to read, but I also got Edgar Poe. And these two geniuses that came into my life gave me language, and that has always been, I think, because we only connect through language. And somebody using the most poignant word, right, makes all the difference sometimes.
Yeah.
You know. So, and you see that in what we do lyrically in songs.
Sure.
So the same thing happens when you start putting it together with phrasings, whatever it is. Somebody's going, that would be better as a major seventh or as a sixth chord than it would be as a regular major chord. And you go, wonder why that, because it feels that way in that song, right?
Right.
And if you heard a recording song that has that.
And it's like leap and jump. They both have those subtle differences that
So
the context.
And
yeah.
we give them names for genre, right? You can hear somebody do a song with a G major chord in it, and they go, "Hey, that's a great country song." You change that exact song to a G major seventh. Somebody goes, "Hey, you're playing jazz."
Yeah.
And so almost these influences that we have is the way we put our structures together, just like you would structure language, gives us what we call genres, right? To a certain degree.
Yeah.
And then the genre breakers, right? People
Yeah.
going like, "I'm doing this in a country song," and you know it don't belong, but they're doing it, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
Yeah, man. Something you just said just really got me going because you're talking about the poignant word, and I think about sometimes when I'm working with songwriting students, I'll have to explain the idea when they you know, the frustration that comes from, oh man, I'm never going to write anything brilliant, but the reality is that you might be setting up the whole song just for this one phrase. And it's all about that. It's about telling that story. It's about, it's like every building needs columns, Columns aren't sexy unless you're in
Right.
Rome,
Yeah, oh yeah.
But,
Right.
there are these, everything performs a function.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great point, and I love that you said that. I was almost getting chill bumps over here thinking about it. What you were saying is when you are, because a word can make a huge difference in the way it's spoken or what it really means in inflection to the song. So when you're a songwriter and the lyrics matter, right? For some of us instrumentalists, sometimes we go, say whatever, right? But it's just not the same. So you're right. When you're teaching a songwriter, is your point being made, or are you trying to make a point? And what's great about words is sometimes they don't even have to. You can write that song that really means nothing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's just totally goofy for a particular reason. Or I wrote a song not too long ago where every line stood alone as a vignette of itself. And whoever connects the song together would make their own interpretation of the song. But each line was like something you would have said, like, trying to think of a line from the song, and of course now I can't. But this idea,
Well, it's like I think about like the genius of Kurt Cobain's lyricism is that.
There you go.
It's just very impactful, short ideas that in sequence, independently might not mean a lot, but it's the weight of the emotion and the flow of the language as it fits with the music. Yeah,
that's it. So if you said, the lighthouse stood brave against the roaring ocean, right? Then that is a simple vignette on its own. And then if you add another line to that, whether it is something you personally seen and so you want to convey a story, you were with somebody or whatever, or et cetera, or just that vignette could stand alone, and then every line you build after that, often you'll see somebody comes up and gives a whole different interpretation of the song than you intended, because that might have been philosophical, and for them it might have been more reality because they were at a place that this mattered. So I think this is one of the great things about songwriting.
Yeah.
Right. What are you trying to accomplish when you write a song?
So I think it's interesting. You mentioned you responded to my songwriting thing as an instrumentalist. So it's clear that you define yourself or you think of yourself more as an instrumentalist, but you clearly have all of this time put in as a writer and
Right.
thinker about words.
Yes.
And I'm curious, it's like, how does that play into your, you mentioned you're doing songwriting.
Yeah.
Do you do a lot of songwriting, or is it just something that sometimes comes up in the way of you maybe composing instrumentally?
Great question, and one of my greatest frustrations, right? Because I feel I feel like my writing, which is very innate in what I do, and I study and et cetera, and went through the whole forms and studied the English and all this. And then again, I'm an instrumentalist where I study, how scales relate, what a plagal cadence is, and all the silly things that would to a regular songwriter would make. I have songwriters come to me going like, I don't know what goes with what, and I'm going, okay, let me show you. Mm-hmm. So, but I have the biggest struggle putting the two of them together, even though I become a songwriter simply because some of this stuff falls together, right? A great riff sometimes can lead to a lyric over top of it. So it's more that way, and I find that frustration with sometimes I'll sit in that moment to myself going like, I just wrote, an amazing, epic, piece of literature just the other day, and I wrote this great, how come I can't put a song together? So the skill of being a songwriter, I have a great admiration for because it is different. Because most of my things that I do write are an instrument-based boogie or groove or jazz. I might even do a whole series of these great chords and put phrases over them and all this kind of stuff. But the actual songwriting, when you hear an actual songwriter write songs, and I'm sure I've had a few that maybe could qualify in that area, but I'm not really a songwriter, and it does escape me. It's a little bit frustrating,
right.
When you got because people will say that. Some you wrote this in a poem, and I go, why did you write a song like that? I'm going, songwriting is.
Well, storytelling. I think it's like, and I guess there's a thing where, like the utility of songs. A lot of times, like you talk about sort of the groove-based stuff. It's really about it's a social music.
Yes. Well, I think songwriter, it is. It's a very. I got a friend named Sam Lewis. I don't know if you know who Sam Lewis is.
I don't think I've met Sam.
Sam Lewis is pretty famous now, but he started here he came from North Carolina, came here to Knoxville, and I worked with him a little while here. Actually recorded him in my recording studio in my basement one time, but he's pretty famous now. He's a friend of Chris Stapleton's, all right? There's a little name dropping, right? Another friend of mine, John French, who I grew up with, is one of the top songwriters out of Florida. But for them, being able to write a song is just, comes so much more natural than it does for me because I'm trying to make it into something. It's like you ever get Play-Doh and all you can make is like a log, Yeah. I'm going like, and other guys are making, I can do that with poetry, and I can do that with, music,
Yeah.
But I've never. Songwriter is a different skill, and it's not always just telling a story. Sometimes it is how to tell the story,
right.
Because the music has to go behind it. I think that it is our era of what was, first of all, became great poets, and if anybody ever looks back in the old centuries, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, actually the greatest warriors were the greatest poets. Mm-hmm. So poetry was very valuable. And then we hit the era of troubadours, right? People traveling around singing the poetry. And now we really, if you might have the best poet in the entire world, and their book might sell 3,000 or 4,000 copies, right?
Yeah.
But a songwriter, right, writes a song, and it really is it is a co-union of that music sounds good with those lyrics. Right. And you can almost take a song that somebody wrote and put other lyrics on it and it don't sound right.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Because that lyric means that song. And some people, if you hear a particular lyric line that is world famous, sometimes you can't speak it to another human without singing it.
Right.
Because
it's inherently those rhythms are in the language.
Right. You couldn't say just the way we were, right, without singing the line from.
Well,
right.
And even part of it is like the emotion of the way that with great songwriters they're encapsulating so much emotion, in the way that they use chords and the way they time these phrases and things like that. So it's almost like when a great song does that and it goes to that like word you're talking about that poignant word, when that moment comes up in that song, it's by that point it's so loaded with emotion and just the ability to move you that it's hard to divorce that.
It is.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes a great song. And I think so there is something ineffable, I think, in the structure of a songwriter versus a great instrument, because a lot of times you hear songwriters who wrote a great song and have a great singer, right, and then maybe have some great instrumentalist end up performing the song because that's their strong suit. And so yeah, I've found that struggle, even though I'm going to be hopefully putting an album out this winter, or at least putting it on track. But a lot of it will be as I usually do. There'll be a few songs that are songy songs,
right,
that songwriters would say was a song. Most of it will be some kind of, set of great chord exchange, great speaking between the musicians, and then maybe some scat put over top of it.
Yeah. Cool.
What I call scat, even though it'll be some kind of yelling. I'm not a great singer. I'm more of a yeller.
So, okay, so I know of you most prominently from as a community leader in these jams that you're hosting. Obviously, you mentioned that you teach and you're doing this. You're writing music and performing your own music. I'm curious, when we look at the pie graph, right? What percentage of each of those things are you maybe right now? And is there anything else in there that I don't know about? Because fundamentally this interview is about me just us getting to know each other. So I'm curious. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. And I don't know that. I think that the pie chart of someone else viewing it would be entirely different than myself viewing it, right? Because here's something I was talking to somebody about the other day: is even the best people you only spend a very minute amount of time with them, and you spend every second of your existence with yourself. Yeah. So you have to be able to find that balance of, am I doing decent in this life? And so sometimes I am, like today I mowed the grass, so I tried to be the best grass mower that existed, right? I'm going to be the lawn man of all time.
How'd you do?
Yeah, yes. I'm just, I tell people that I chew metal and spit nails. I've always been very intense. So whichever one that I am at, I give that to, and I think most people think of me as a blues jam host, where I put these great musicians together, and we always have a house band. Lately, I've been calling it the Roger Hay Band, even though we've been through several varieties. But we do, of course, gigs besides that. But my pursuit of seeing how far I can take a piece of music, because I'm not really John Coltrane, who became so insane with the way he approached music that it became unlistenable, whereas he had. But I try to take this and get other people involved with me and see what we can do. So we go into these massive jams, right, which is one of the things I love. So when I get on stage, matter of fact, you had Jake Smith as one of your folks on this, and Jake and I had jammed together a few times. We actually did. I have a series called the Roger Hay Guitar Workshops, and we invite people in. Of course, you can, it's a little bit of money. I think last time it was like, whatever, $99 or whatever. But we study guitar all day, right? And Jake was one of those. And then at the end of the day, we had a big concert. So me and Jake and two other great guitar players, along with a fabulous band, go through all these great jams. So how do we take things, Dorian scale over a seventh, all this kind of great music stuff and put it out there. So that I consider the biggest part of the pie, right? The other parts kind of are just another part of the songwriting or the poetry or the being a good husband, taking the cars in for a car wash. You got to do all these things in life that makes it. But yes, the community has given so much to me that I end up giving to them because it's such fun. I was telling somebody the other day, from the moment we kick off a song until we've walked off the stage, none of the tribulations of life enter my being or mind or et cetera, right? I'm not worried about how many bills I owe. I'm not worried about, if I was sick or, any of those kind of things. None of the things that trouble you in life. During that moment is what I would consider what maybe heaven's like. Full glee all the time, and your mind is so engaged, and your joy is engaged at the same time. So if I hear, that's one of the reasons I put together the guys I play with, is so that he plays that riff, I'm going to, correspond with another that might be along this line. And so we continue to develop a song. Sometimes a song that we played 6 months ago no longer sounds exactly the same way it does now. However, the point is to still keep it recognizable to the audience as a song they may know or kind of get, right?
Right.
So we do all those. Yeah, it's still being known as not and each genre, jazz, blues, country, whatever, even though I'm considered probably more of a blues guitar player.
Yeah.
It's really weird because I think the blues guys in town all come to me and go, "You're a rock guitar player," and the rock guys come in town and go, "You're a blues guitar player," and the other guys go, "You're playing jazz right there." Well, I don't know what what it is.
Well, I mean, music's music, and honestly, all of these traditions, like the early players, were playing a little bit of everything.
I think so, but I also think that you are, you can pull up, maybe an artist you like, and sometimes it is a certain thing that pulls that, and sometimes it's like. Because mine's always dichotomy. I'm always got the Batman thing, right? Like I got that really great pull to one side and one to the other. And then on the other side of the sphere, I'm not interested in those at all. I've never really been much, even though it was in my home, my mom loved country music, right? And would listen to it all the time. And I absolutely admire it. But I've never been a big, I want to go play country music, right? I think that if you listen to the greats, Merle Haggard or, George Jones or Tom T. Hall, what a great songwriter, right? Small dogs and children and strawberry wine, right? That's just that's amazing. Yeah. But I never had that pull to go do that. But the moment I heard LaGrange, I had to do that. I had to do that. I got to do that, right? Yeah. So that is. So I think to a degree you are maybe after that, but I think because other things are influenced in that you start chasing those other things outside of it.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. Well, so, I guess who are the people will sort of, you're talking about like how you're perceived versus living with yourself all the time. Man, right now, who's your, of your whole life, you've experienced a lot of guitarists, a lot of influences, a lot of whatever. Who are the guitarists or instrumentalists that you feel are the most part of your DNA as a musician?
I was thinking about that actually on the way over here because it is so strange that because I was thinking about sometimes my heroes, guitar heroes, when I hear them, because that's how we backtracked. That's how I found the blues, right, was through my favorite Jimmy Page and Billy Gibbons, right? I was going, okay, so they were interpreting the blues, right, which we all are now, right? And then they led me to these ones. But none of them, sound like them. I was watching, I don't know if you've ever seen that It Might Get Loud movie. Mm-hmm. It's got Jimmy Page, Jack White, and The Edge in it, right? And they're playing there, and of course Jimmy Page is my all-time idol as far as a guitarist goes. And he played this riff, the one of the famous, Zeppelin riffs. And the other two guys were like starstruck just watching him play it, right? Which is a fairly simple riff. But then they showed a scene of him listening to, he put a record on. He's got this massive record collection, right? He got an album, actual vinyl, and he puts it on, and it's Link Ray playing Rumble.
Yeah.
And the light in his eyes, you could see this is what drove that man. And to me, Jimmy Page sounds nothing like Link Ray. That's because the other things that influenced him, but that's where he feels like he's coming from. And I realized that with some guys you hear, like Kurt Cobain, you were saying, who would say they were influenced by, and sometimes they'll say somebody like Wes Montgomery, and I'm going like, what?
Yeah.
That doesn't, come on, those two.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really work that way. You see what I'm saying? Is that those influences, you become a culmination of all those. So for me, I kind of think of myself, LaGrange, swamp music from Skinnerd, some of these kind of Southern blues rocky, Amos Moses by Jerry Reed, right? If you put all those together, but I don't sound anything like that because somewhere along the line, I also picked up Jeff Beck and I picked up John Schofield and these other things, and as you start to flesh these things out, then you go, and you're your own DNA.
Right. You
can't make even though I see some people are dead ringers for so-and-so guitar player, right? But you end up sounding like you, whatever that is, even no matter what your influence is. So my biggest influence is Jimmy Page, because of all of that, because he had he could write songs, produce songs, along with being a great instrumentalist, right? Then, Billy Gibbons, Jeff Beck, I grew up all that whole guitar era of doom, right, where everybody was like his old, dinosaur rock, Robin Trower, Frank Marino and Mahogany Rush, this big, loud guitars. And then, of course, we went through that whole era where nobody played a guitar solo for a long time, so I was like going, I don't know what to do with myself. So those kind of things, and then all the Al Di Meola's, this kind of expression, like especially Jeff Beck, who was passed away recently. But that kind of, let's interpret guitar into every kind of thing we can make it do.
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean I think it's funny. We sometimes those moments of inspiration, like when I'm improvising, frequently I'm like thinking about a lot of times it's not even a good as a singer. I'm like mostly improvising as a singer.
Right.
I might be thinking about another singer, but I also might be thinking about another instrument, or a solo that like Chuck mentioned Coltrane, like thinking about like a phrase in a Coltrane solo pops in your head, and all of a sudden you're tapping into this other thing.
Right.
So
let me ask you a question. What usually goes on like in your mind when you are playing an open, like, because we do so many open jams. If you're doing like a section that's open for improv, whether you're singing it or playing it, does it go like, oh, I need to do this skill that I've learned at my craft, or is it more like ethereal? Because everybody approaches that so much differently.
Yeah, I mean, I try to just be present, and I try to like look for the pocket. I think about it in like a mixing engineer, and the idea that it's like they're all of the frequency ranges, and it's like the way a good mixing engineer sort of has the different pieces that all fit together.
Yeah.
I try to think about, certainly if I'm doing something accompanimental, I'm trying to figure out what in the frequency, what rhythmically, what isn't being covered, to just be out of the way, but support when I can. And then when I'm soloing, it's I don't know. I it's definitely a more ethereal thing. I'm a vocalist first before being an instrumentalist.
Right.
So I definitely fall into that category more than I am like the.
Well, you said a couple things that were really interesting in that. First of all, you said the word rhythmically, and you said the word pocket. So as you're creating this stuff, that's one of the things I have to, I tell my students, there's only 7 notes in a scale, right? Even if you use something chromatic, or only 7 chords in a key, but there's a billion rhythms. Mm-hmm. So the rhythm is what's going to make the song, because you can hear a song that's used the same chords as another song, but done rhythmically, it sounds different, right? So I think the rhythm has to be so, preeminent in your mind as you're working through any song. I tell my students, I say, you have to have the kick drum up front in your mind. Your solo is way back in your mind. The bass player's got to be there, right? And then you create off that. But the other thing you said, which is another, ineffable, really mysterious thing, is pocket.
Yeah.
And as I could already tell that you're a seasoned musician because you used the word pocket, and you were comfortable with it. Yeah. And a lot of people, when I say, my dad used to do this experiment when he was trying to get people to understand about God. My dad would say, I'm going to give you a word, and you tell me what you associate in your mind, right? So he'd say water. And some people say, oh, yeah, I've seen a glass of water, and some people, oh, I've seen an ocean, right? So he would say God. And, of course, they got no idea. So the same thing happens when I ask people pocket. They can't describe it because I don't know that it necessarily is. We know exactly what it is without fail. But how do you describe it?
Yeah.
How do you, where do you go, that's the pocket and that's not, to somebody that don't know pocket, right?
Yeah.
But we know exactly what pocket is, and that's so exclusive to that crew of musicians when you get into that, when you go, I like playing with that guy because he lays it in the pocket. Mm-hmm. And that's so valuable. But that's so unique to us, right? That's that kind of inner language, and it's not really a trick word or anything. It just happens to be what it is. But until you discover it, but till you become part of that part of the Illuminati, right? Yeah. Then you can't. And once you have it, you can't explain it to somebody else.
Well, and it's also one of those things that you don't understand until you've truly. You just have to reach a certain point with your instrument that you can groove with people. You can collectively feel a groove and like let go. And it's not about am I doing this right or wrong. It's okay. This is where it sits, and we can take it a different place from there. And so that's a hard thing to teach. It's like if people haven't gotten to that place of mastery of their instrument, But then I guess I wonder how you would teach that to like a novice musician.
It is. I think it's like any kind of moment of discovery, like the old climbing up the hill till you get to the guru at the top, right?
Yeah.
That you're after that chase. I think all those things, because you were saying just then, and again, one of those things that you've said several things that are very poignant. But you said when you can just let go, right, and start to play, and you know that you're in the pocket, right? The part of that comes from your skill and your craft. So if you work on your craft, same thing I did. One time I was laying brick when I was a young man, 17, 18, right? And I'm out laying brick. And it's a nice, tough job. But, I'm making like mortar that's like really thick and then too thin. And, I'm putting a brick on top of it and I'm having to use the line and I'm tapping it down and you're using a level. And there's a guy beside me that's been laying brick for 30 years, right? And all his are all perfect. And he don't even need one of them lines, right? He's like, click, click, click. And he's laying, and I'm going like, how do you do that? And he said, it just comes. It just does. So I think you have to work that craft. He had to go through those days where his mortar didn't look beautiful, right? And his bricklaying didn't look good, and his bricks were crooked. And so that is also part of our going through the fire, right?
Confidence also, it's like, there's the actual skill, but then there's also the ability to know it when you
see it or feel it.
Yeah. You're in the middle of it.
Here it is. Yeah, that's it. So those things are my chase. Is these amazing musicians and jams that I have. I host a couple of jams, open chord, right, and then at Alley Rays I hope at those two, and then we play all over town all the time, and we try to make everybody get up and enjoy it and that kind of stuff too. But we are on a chase to find where this song can go.
Yeah,
that's how to do it.
That's big. That's big.
I guess I don't know. That's what I do. It's an unquenchable thirst, I guess, in a way, right? But every now and then, when you get that good drink, you go, "Oh, that was some good bourbon right there."
Yep. Oh man. So how long have you actually been here in Knoxville?
35 years, I think.
35 years.
Yeah, I'm an old guy, so I've went through several things. I guess I'm not all that old, but I've been here quite a while. So I went through several of the of the phases of what goes on in music around here. Mm-hmm. It was, and it's been every one. This is a almost amazing musical town. Mm-hmm. Because I traveled, like I said, I worked for Charvel Jackson Guitars, which also owned a Kai recording gear, and so I sold all those things all over, and we did, NAMM shows every year. We did sales meetings, so I've been all over the country to all the big cities, and of course it's about music, so we'd go see music, and all of them, Dallas, Atlanta, L.A., Chicago, etc. And it would stun me that you could find some, obviously great bands there, but it's almost like when you are a great basketball team, but you never win the championship because your B team is not that good, right? Mm-hmm. But when your B team is as good as the A team, and your C team here in this area, I find the level of musicianship from whoever you might think is the best musician around, right down the line. You were just talking about John Puckett, et cetera. I mean, I could name 50, guitarists in this town that could play with the best bands anywhere in the world.
Oh yeah.
This town is loaded. Same thing if you look at bass players or drummers or, keyboards or singers. Good God, we are loaded with amazing talent in this thing. And I seen that with other cities I went to. I'm going like, their depth chart's not as good as ours. Yeah. So I've been very blessed here at this town to see so many of them. And so many of them do good and go on to greater things, this kind of stuff. Like I was talking about Sam Lewis, Austin Crum. I played with Austin Crum when he was like 11 or 12. He used to come to my jams. We'd jam. Now he's, doing recordings, with the greatest, country bands ever.
Yeah.
He plays with Vince Gill. So, these kind of, this town has got fabulous music.
Yeah. Why do you suppose that is? Do you have any thoughts on that or theories?
Sure, I do. I don't know how valid it is, but I think part of it is because just like any other thing, even though, I refer to sports a lot because I grew up, playing sports. But I think the old thing, Miles Davis, you said, play with the best, mm-hmm. And that's how Coltrane became Coltrane, right? Because at first when he's playing with Miles, he wasn't on Miles' level. Yeah. And then he becomes the thing. And that's the same way if you see these great, I used to read them in Guitar Player magazines and stuff, like Paul Gilbert moved to L.A. to be with those greater guitar players. So here in this town, I think seeing and being around, and you develop without even really thinking about it because you hear that guy and you go, that was awesome, I want to do that. Or I want to do something like it. or what if I presented this? And you said something about confidence. You have to have the confidence to to produce it. Even those that are very shy, I see some guys that are stage shy. They really but they still want to. Whatever it is inside them, that's got to come out, right? Yeah. So they play whatever it is, they're music wise, right? And then you find that thing with somebody else that done it, and each guy on each level keeps climbing up because you are almost forced to. Right? Anvil makes steel, right? So this.
Well, and you think it's like another thing I think about is like the accessibility, which is something that I don't think you get elsewhere. It's like there's a lot of access to the best players.
Yes.
Which you don't get in a lot of cities.
You do not, and that is one of the cases here. It's much more cultured here, and much more common to be a welder during the day and be a great drummer at night.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's something that you don't find in a lot of other towns where, because as for some reason we have this, it's okay to come together on a back porch, right?
Yeah.
And talk about or be about music, or it used to be. I used to tell people that people would invite me to their parties or whatever, and I'd go, I know you're not really inviting me. You're inviting me and my guitar.
Yeah.
Right? You see, and that's how that community. Most of the things I go to are jams or some kind of music performance, even if it's just we're sitting out at a picnic, right? Mm-hmm. Almost everybody. So this, where they came out of the hills early, where people sit around and jam bluegrass, right? The Bill Monroe thing, right? A person I call a friend, we do a few things together, but he's world famous as Andy Wood here in town. Well, Andy was, the mandolin player for Marty Stewart for a while, right? And so this kind of. He came out of that bluegrass era where his dad drug into bluegrass events and this kind of stuff. And we are okay with you being a musician but not being famous. And not every place is that way. There is a certain, I think, stigma that comes when people say that I'm a musician, right, in other towns, because they either expect you to be phenomenal, right, or they expect you to be broke. Right.
Which, don't get me wrong, you can really be both. I've been testing the limits on that for a long time.
Oh yes, you can be. That's what I love about this area is I see and when I point out to people that Queen's guitar player Brian May is an astrophysicist.
Yeah.
Right. That you don't have to. That being a full-time musician, you will have time to do another job if you so wanted to.
Yeah.
If you wanted to have a lawn company, if you wanted to do whatever. I don't think the mind has to be that limited.
Yeah.
That's what I also tell my students that I'm teaching. I'm going, your mind doesn't have to be so limited to only see one thing when you're playing.
Yeah.
To only be, we as humans can do more. I see people juggle. I can't juggle, right? But I see people juggle. They have 3 or 4. Seen a guy there, they juggling, and he juggled with 3 Rubik's cubes and solved them in about a minute and a half, right? I'm going like, I can't do, So there's a capability. You can keep more than one thing in your mind. So you could be a great, whatever it is, right? You could be a very great sales team leader and also a really good banjo picker.
Right.
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 So
yeah,
I think that helps this town, that we don't have that stigma that, because I get that every now and then. The guy goes like, if you're not paying your dues and you're not living on the street, because of your music, then you're not. I'm going like, that don't always work that way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. I mean, I've always thought that too.
Oh,
I guess
happy birthday, America! Got a few of them still going. He had a leftover.
I know.
He just had the one left over, right? Boom, firecracker for everybody.
Around here, it's like we get them all the time.
Oh yeah, you get that.
Yeah, man. Well, so let me ask you this then. You've clearly done a lot of different stuff in music. Between recording and clearly a big part of this community, what are the things you're looking to do? Do you have like a bucket list, preferably? I guess so.
I don't think it stops. I think recording the next, album, not because, I've got to get an album out or whatever. I think simply because it seems to be next. But I think that in that whole development of like this, you hitting me up and going, hey, let's chat. Getting to know you, getting to know the people the venues in town, the people that are now playing music in town, the younger people coming up. Mm-hmm. This kind of thing I think is valuable not because I'm going like, oh, I want to accomplish this or that or the other. It's because it adds to who I am as a person and as a musician. Everything you listen to, because we have those five, senses, right? Mm-hmm. Taste, smell, hear, seeing, and this auditory thing is not, because you could hear, like we heard the firecracker, right? And we go, that left over from the July 4th. So our brain puts things together. So the same thing when I hear somebody play music, it means something to us and it adds to my life.
Yeah.
So if I get to talk to you, now I know something about you. Yeah. I can take that with me. So this journey that I'm on from zero to death is going to be accumulation of everything on me, right? Mm-hmm. Everything that I've gathered. And so these people that, and for me, music is what matters. So that's the reason I think being a host of a jam is, my main calling, I guess, because there are several guys that came up to me and said, I'd love to play in public, but I never have. And I'll tell them how to get on stage, mm-hmm. And there are guys that are playing gigs in this town now that played their very first guitar lick or piano lick or drum on one of my stages at one of my jams, right? And I don't know that is, it added to me as much as it did to them, because now I know something about life.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I was really pursuing that. Oh, I need to help the next generation, or I need to. The next guy needs to have as much opportunity as I do. That's not the pursuit. I don't know why that is. I think it's really strange. It's just inclusion. I think that's been the way since one of my favorite things in life, and they're really, really kicked in the teeth on any kind of movie, is a high school quarterback, right? I was a high school quarterback with accolades, and I had all-state mentions and all this kind of stuff, right? But in that huddle, right, we were after one pursuit, after one goal. And so being that same thing with other musicians, whatever this song's going to turn out to be it'll never happen again. Frank Zappa used to do that, right, where he'd go, I'm not doing the same as we did on the record. You'll hear some bands go, I like Journey, right? Mm-hmm. And they do a great job, and every solo is exactly the same way it was on the record, which if I'm doing a Journey song, I'll do that, right? But I like the songs where we're exploring as each, and that moment, for however long was on that stage on that night for those minutes, it's the only time that was performed, and only by that group, right? And we get to take that wherever we go forever. Like we'll look at each other, that old, like when you look at, oh yeah, that was, that kind of thing. It's neat too. I was doing a sideline with some other guys talking about, the difference in the genres and et cetera. And you'll hear like a jazz guy do a riff, and because he put he might have put a melodic minor over a, dominant seventh chord, right? It's something that country guys would not necessarily do, right? Mm-hmm. Or blues guys, right? And he'll look over at his, at the other guy's like, look what we did, right? And it may not even sound fantastic, right? But the fact that he built this, right? Yeah. It's like we're talking about the Frank Lloyd Wright House versus the Biltmore, right? And then you might go with a blues guy who gets this unreal tone coming out of a particular riff that he ripped, and he'll pull the last note, and he's got this soaring, wailing note that goes through the entire progression. Yeah. One note, and you go, and then everybody looks at everybody's like, yeah. So I think, those, you can't rebuy that. You can't package it. You can't sell it. So that I think is something that music is so beautiful for.
Oh man.
Yeah, just that. Oh. That moment, and let it, like you're a singer. That singer that puts that moment out there, that says those words or moment at that time. And you've probably done the same song sometimes, and sometimes it comes out better for some reason.
Yeah.
Whether it's the crowd interacting with you better, or you can feel them better, or the musicians, you feel them with you better. So I think that's the thing.
That's the thing. Well, that's a great thing.
That's the thing.
We're getting to the end of this hour, man. Is there where are we sending people to find? Are we just sending them out to Open Chord and Alley Rays, or do you have a website? Or
I don't. I had a website for a long time. I don't, run a website anymore because Facebook mainly. Facebook, Instagram. Just look up for Roger Hay guitarist, Roger Hay band, or the Romeo Kings is more my classic rock type band. But yes, all those, I would love to, mention all the people that I've played with and that kind of stuff, but we don't have that kind of time. But all those wonderful people that play in this town, and I know a whole crew of them. that is so valuable to all of us, I think, and that's so any of those will get you in touch with me if you want to learn guitar, or if you want to learn. I had a harmonica player who I'm not a harmonica player, but he goes, I get up there on stage and I know how to play harmonica, but I know nothing about music theory or guitars or et cetera, and I don't know how to lead a band in. Right, because you'll hear like a guitar player get them going, hey, we're starting on the 5. Yeah. He goes, I got no clue what that is. So I've had a couple of harmonica players, had a couple of singers come to me, going like, I'm only a singer, and I can hear music, but I don't know what they're talking about. I'm going, okay. So when somebody tells you they're going to the 6, let me tell you what that means. So, I give all that kind of how to fit in to a musical environment, right? I think that's one of my things I can give. Like you were saying, teaching a songwriting student, right? Yeah. So if you're teaching somebody songwriting, it's going, hey, you do this to this. This is part of the craft. Mm-hmm. Because each of these things, even though they seem, just like they're a flowing river, but they're not. They're part of a craft, right? You have to craft those. So just look me up under Roger Hay on Facebook. That's the easiest place to find me. I usually list my gigs there. And that's pretty much it, Nick. That's about how we do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, this is great.
Well,
Thank
good,
you so
good.
much for coming to hang out.
Good. You had no problem getting me to yak. That's what people say, right? Usually I have a lot of jokes to tell, and we crack up and that kind of stuff. But we had a good time doing all this, talking about where music takes us.
Yeah, yeah.
I like that. A little more philosophical instead of figuring out the nuts and bolts.
Yeah.
We went to some deep.
We dug in deep.
We dug in deep and got down into the soul and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. All right. Thank you guys so much for listening. This has been Meet Music Knoxville. We will be back with you in another month. Thank you so much, and hope you all have a great rest of your day.
I'm your boogie woogie daddy, won't you rock a while with me? I'm your boogie woogie daddy, won't you rock a while with me? I'm your boogie woogie daddy, ain't no place you'd rather be. All you pretty girls, throw your hands up in the air. Woo! Yeah, all you pretty girls, throw your hands up in the air. Let's have a good time and boogie like we don't care. I'm your boogie woogie daddy. Boogie woogie daddy. Boogie woogie daddy. Boogie woogie daddy. I'm your boogie woogie daddy. Boogie woogie daddy. I'm your boogie woogie daddy. Boogie woogie daddy. I'm your boogie woogie daddy. Just you. You can all blame me if you stay out way too late. Way too late. You can all blame me if you stay out way too late. Cause I'm your boogie woogie daddy. These blues got me feeling great.